How have I not done this list before now?
Very serious.
What's up, Brew Crew? Welcome back to Beer City Board Games. My name is Clay, and today I want to talk about my favorite horror-themed games. I love Halloween and fall in general, really. I also really love scary movies, but probably not the type that most folks like to watch. I especially like old, campy B horror movies. If it's bad, it's good. I love it when a bad movie really leans into the cheese factor. Some of my favorites are Return of the Living Dead, Class of Nuke 'Em High, House, and Army of Darkness. So, with this being my favorite time of year, and my favorite holiday, and my favorite movie genre, I can't believe that I have not done a list of my favorite horror-themed games yet. I did do a short list of some of my favorite Halloween games on an episode of OFPG Voices last year, which I will link below. And while those choices still stand, there are plenty more games that I want to talk about. What's odd, though, is that despite my love for the genre, I actually own very few horror-themed games. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but if I had to guess, I think that the theme can be a little off-putting for folks who do not also enjoy the genre, and so I don't end up picking up as many of them. I have yet to play any of the horror movie-themed games from Trick or Treat Studios, which I need to fix ASAP. And I'm also very interested in trying out Harrow County, which has me intrigued enough to look into the graphic novel as well. But even still, I've got a list of 6 horror-themed games that I think are a lot of fun and perfect for a Halloween game night. So here we go. Number 6 is a game that I don't actually own anymore, and that's Betrayal at House on the Hill. I don't own it, but I believe that legally I am still required to put it on any horror-related board game list. There's a good reason why this game gets recommended so often, despite being a pretty fragile game. This game takes pretty much every horror movie trope that's ever been conceived and throws it all into one box. Plus, the concept of the game is just so cool. You play as a group of adventurers going into a spooky house and exploring the different rooms. You're going to do this by flipping over room tiles based on whether you're exploring the upstairs, main floor, or basement. And because the tiles come out in a random order, the layout of the house will be different each time you play. Most of the times, the rooms will either have an event, an item, or an omen in them. And the more omens that are collected, the more likely it is that the player will trigger the haunt, which is a pivotal moment in the game where, depending on the players and the items or omens that have been found, a certain player will be revealed to be a traitor who has lured you into the house, and you can bet it's not for a good reason. This turning point is the main reason this game makes such a great horror-themed game. There are so many combinations, and while some of them can turn out to be kind of broken, many of them are incredibly exciting and a ton of fun to play. You might be fighting demons or werewolves, or trying to escape before the contraption around your neck sends your head rolling across the floor. I believe there's something like 50 different scenarios in the base game alone, and while they aren't all winners, I think if you like horror movies, then you really need to try out Betrayal at House on the Hill. And actually, my number 5 is a game that I don't own anymore either, but that's because we finished all of the scenarios, and that's Mythos Tales. This game is very similar to Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, if you're familiar with that game, but with a Lovecraftian twist. It basically plays like a choose-your-own-adventure book. There are several different cases that you're trying to solve, and for each case you will choose which clues to follow up on and who you will question. There's a directory, a map of Arkham, and a newspaper from the day that the event took place. And there's also a big book with all of the narratives for the different cases, including all of the people that around the town that you're going to question. Some of them will give you important information, and some will lead nowhere. It's like solving a murder mystery, but with a supernatural twist. You have to be careful too, because you only have a certain amount of time to solve each case. This is a great game to play solo, or like we did with 2 players. Jen and I had a lot of fun setting a spooky atmosphere and playing this at night with some ambient music and candles. Now there are some typos and other errors in this game that can make some of the scenarios especially challenging, but since we already knew that was a possibility going into it, it didn't really bother me too much. Just know that if that is something that really bothers you, you might want to pass on this one. For us though, it made for a really fun spooky time. That's Mythos Tales. Number 4 is the newest game on this list, which we just picked up at Gen Con this year, and that's Creepshow. In this little card game, you're going to be making your way through a deck of villain cards. There will be 3 of them out at a time, and you'll be collaboratively creating the story for each one. On your turn, you can either take a creep action, which lets you discard cards and refill your hand, and then add a suspense card to one of the villains. These suspense cards can be positive or negative, and for each villain you're trying to hit a certain suspense value depending on the ending card that ends up getting played for that story. Your other option is to show, which will allow you to play down story cards depending on the act that that story is in. These story cards will give you different ways to earn points or give you a special benefit. Some of them even let you choose a path from a branching storyline. Once a story is in its 3rd act, a player can play one of the always available ending cards, either the face-up one or draw blindly from the top of the deck, and you add it to one of the villain storylines. This card will have 2 different outcomes. If the total suspense value played to that villain exceeds a certain number, then it will tell you who scores points and how. If the total suspense value is less than that number, all other players who played suspense cards to that villain will score points. Now, in all honesty, I kind of put this in a similar category as Betrayal at House on the Hill. The game is by no means perfect, and it did take a little while for us to get into it, but it was still a lot of fun. There is some excitement there when someone plays an ending card and you find out who's going to score the points. But the main reason that I think this is a great horror-themed game is that, just like some of my favorite horror movies, you can really lean into the cheesiness here. I highly recommend reading the cards aloud as you play them and really stringing the stories together. This can make for a lot of laughs with some of the ridiculous scenarios that can happen. Plus, the artwork on the cards is legitimately creepy. So I think that if you're looking for a casual card game with a lot of laughs to play around Halloween, Creepshow would be a great choice. Number 3 puts a little twist on the horror genre and has you playing one of the villains, although that's much more common now than when the game originally came out, and that's Fate of the Elder Gods. This game has you playing as a cult leader trying to summon your specific world-ending deity from the Cthulhu mythos. You'll send your cultists to different areas of Arkham to increase your power, but you have to watch out because if you have too many cultists in one place, investigators will get suspicious and show up to ruin your fun. Each location will give you a certain benefit, but you'll also have an additional benefit if your cult controls that location. You'll also be readying spells that you can cast to help you or hurt your opponents, but you might also become cursed, which is really bad, but handled in a very fun way. Whenever a player is cursed, the player to their right will draw a curse card, and it will tell them the effect and how the curse is triggered. So the player who is cursed knows that they are cursed, but doesn't know when or how that curse will manifest. It adds a lot of tension to an already intense game. I will say that generally speaking, this game plays best with higher player counts, but It also has a pretty solid solo mode as well. I think if you like the idea of playing a horror-themed game from the point of view of the villains, Fate of the Elder Gods is worth a look. I do believe it's currently out of print, but there are copies available on the Geek Market on BGG for a reasonable price. Or just find me at a convention and we'll get it played. My number 2 horror-themed game is one that I was really looking forward to playing, and that's Vagrant Song. This game has some of the coolest, creepiest looking old school artwork of any game that I had seen up until that point. This is a cooperative game where you are all playing as passengers on a haunted train heading for who knows where. Each scenario is an encounter with a different spirit, or haint as they're called in the game, and you're trying to restore their humanity to put them to rest, which sometimes means punching a ghost. There are a couple of things that are really interesting about this game. First off, I like that the characters that you're playing are not the typical tropes for this type of game. They're all pretty unique, with unique abilities and very good at different things. But I think the coolest thing that this game does is using the bindle and how it controls the enemy in the game. There's a little bindle full of a bunch of different types of tokens, and after each player's turn, they will draw a token out of the bindle. Depending on the type of token that's pulled, that will determine the type of action that the enemy will take. Usually bad for the players. Each haint has different behaviors for each token, and I think this is a really cool way to allow each of them to feel very different while keeping the action management familiar throughout the game. There were definitely some vagaries when we played around movement and targeting, which could be a little frustrating at times, but overall I thought that the game was really fun and has a great story, great artwork, and really cool gameplay elements. So that's my number 2, Vagrant Song. And the number 1 game on this list is a game that we have had for quite a while, and we still have a lot of fun whenever it hits the table. And it's another Cthulhu Mythos game, and that's Eldritch Horror. Now, Arkham Horror was one of our first games that we really dove into when we got into board gaming, and we still own the second edition of it. But I really think that I am much more likely to break out and play Eldritch Horror at this point. I just really prefer the way that the story beats are handled in this one, and it's much easier to manage in my opinion. This is another cooperative game where players are investigators traveling the world trying to stop one of the great old ones from awakening. So basically the exact opposite of Fate of the Elder Gods. There's an entire map of the world that has to be explored, and you'll have different encounters in each location. Depending on where an investigator is, that will determine which encounter deck they draw from. You'll mostly be trying to gear up to fight monsters and close gates, but you also have to collect clue tokens to spend at certain locations to solve mysteries, because you'll need to solve 3 of those mysteries in order to win. This is a game that I am happy to keep going back to because of the way that the theme is implemented and because of how challenging it is. It's a very tough game to win, and it's very rewarding when you do. There's plenty of luck involved here, and you're usually rolling a lot of dice, which is typically a bad thing for me, but getting gear can help you mitigate those dice rolls. I also love the universe within a universe that has been created with these Arkham Files games from Fantasy Flight, to the point where I even have my favorite investigators to play. Arkham Horror, the card game, very nearly made this list also, but I've only ever played that solo, and even though I think the game is incredibly well designed and insanely difficult, I like the multiplayer cooperative nature of Eldritch Horror more. All right, everyone, that's it for my list of my favorite horror-themed games. Now, I wanted to avoid calling them scary games because it's hard to get scared by a board game. Still, I think these are all great choices to try out with Halloween just a few days away. And let me know in the comments below what your favorite horror game is, what game consistently hits your table for Halloween. And bonus points if you can suggest some good, as in bad, scary movies as well. And until next time, let's get another round for the table.